Now, right off the bat, when we get into the Exodus story, remember, as I talked about at the end of Genesis, you have them basically coming into Kemet and them trying to basically establish that relationship in Kemet. So when we get into Exodus, what you're going to see is exactly them trying to place themselves in history. Now, what you have to understand, and as we'll go through in this book, is when it's talking about the Hebrews, I talked about this before, when it's talking about the Hebrew Israelites and everything they're doing, as we got into in Ancient History 1 and 2, it's talking about the Greeks themselves. And they're going to give you this whole Hebrews doing this and this story about the Israelites, but it's really talking about themselves. They're talking about the Greeks. And it's plain to see when you see it. So when we get into Exodus, now it's saying here, Exodus already starts off with them basically naming the descendants of Jacob, where Jacob has been called Israel. So when it's talking about the children of Israel, it's talking about the descendants of Jacob, of course. So it says here, Exodus 1, start at 6 here. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful, and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So what is it saying? It's saying these people came into Egypt and they multiplied. They gained in numbers. As I talked about in Genesis, they said they was going to go in and infiltrate. That's what we basically translated the word to them going into Kemet and infiltrate. It said, let us go in and infiltrate them. Let us basically go in there, confound their speech and scatter them and all this and that. So we understand what it's talking about here. As I said, it's giving you them. So you had basically, as we know from history, the Greeks, the Romans coming into Kemet, learning, being taught by the Egyptians, growing in numbers. And it's saying here they growed and they multiplied and they became powerful and all this and that. So now it's talking about here, Exodus 1:8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. So now, it's basically the Greeks talking about themselves. It's the reverse. It wasn't so much the Egyptians, of course, worrying about the Greeks and saying to the Greeks, get up out the land. You guys are growing too much in numbers and we're worried about you. It was the powers that be understanding where the Egyptians were and how powerful they were. And the fact that the Egyptians did not have, aspirations of global domination. It was about spirituality. It wasn't about going out to use their knowledge and power to gain control of the world. And that's obviously something that the Greeks wanted to do. So them talking about, before they joined with their enemies, that's what happened with the Greeks. The Greeks was the one who joined. They were the ones who joined with the enemies of the Egyptians. They were the ones who basically let the Persians in the back door to come in and conquer and take over so they could eventually take over themselves. So it's basically them, as I said, using the Hebrews to give you their history, hiding behind the Hebrews. Because we know damn well that the Greeks in Kemet, they didn't know anything. They was taught everything. We know it wasn't no Hebrews in there. It wasn't no Jews in ancient Kemet going in there and being mighty and learning. Where's that information at? Where can we find any information in Kemet of them basically coming in there and growing mighty and growing in numbers? But I have shown you throughout my series about the Ionians, the Greeks, about how the Egyptians went in and helped them build the temple of Zeus and everything like that. And they was helping each other out. They learned so much from the ancient Egyptians. We know about this, as I said, and as it shows in the temple of Seti I and in the temple of Ramses III about there being Europeans in Kemet as citizens. We know they were the Greeks. We know. So we understand that they're basically flipping the story to make it seem as if, the Hebrews went through all this and that it's talking about them when we know this is the Greek story. That's the whole reason why they know it, because they lived through it. And, when you do the etymology of a lot of these words, the etymology of a lot of these words is going to go back to Greek anyway. Plain and simple, we'll go through that. But we know it was the Greeks that was there and not the Hebrews. Again, since we know, and since the Romans told us and the Greeks as well have told us, they came into Kemet to learn. The Greeks, the history is there. Thales, Aristotle, everybody came in there to get this information from the ancient Egyptians. Again, the question goes back to when the Persians came in to conquer the Egyptian territory, where were the Romans? Where were the Greeks? Where were the people that were supposed to come in and help the Egyptians that learned so much from them? Nobody came to Egypt's aid. Nobody came to help them out. That was part of the plan. It was a setup. And this is what's clear to see. So it's giving you the downfall of Kemet here in Exodus when you really begin to understand. That's what we'll go through. And again, these Hebrews are just the Greeks trying to make themselves trying to make it seem as if, the Egyptians were deserving of being conquered. So, as we go on, it's a couple of things we got to address that, can get cleared up when you read Exodus as far as the identity of the ancient Egyptians. So now when you read here, Exodus 1, 18 and 19, it says here in 18, and the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men, children alive? Remember, the Pharaoh was supposed to have ordered the midwives to basically go and kill all the men, children that were born and keep the women alive, but kill the men, children. Okay. So it says basically, why have you basically done this and kept the men, children alive? And the midwife said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore God dwelt with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So now understand, we know 100% the ancient Egyptians was black. We understand this. We understand it was black. So you have the Europeans saying that they was white. You have Arabs saying that they was Arab, so on and so forth. Now it's easy to kill that nonsense. So these are the Jews that they say were enslaved by the ancient Egyptians. This is what they're supposed to look like, plain and simple. So these people were supposed to be enslaved in Kemet by the ancient Egyptians. So the whole thing is, they look like white folks. And if the ancient Egyptians were supposed to be white folks, and the Jews were supposed to look like this, how would Pharaoh be able to tell if they saved anybody alive as far as the men? How do you know if that's a baby Hebrew or just a regular baby? It's easy to hide a child, giving you the whole conundrum of, well, wait a minute, Pharaoh just ordered the firstborn, or the men, I should say, in Kemet to be slaughtered. Kill all the men. But if they look alike, how can you tell? How can you tell who's a Hebrew and who's just a regular Egyptian? Now it says here, Exodus chapter 2, it says, and the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she seen him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. Now we understand this part, we know what's going on. It's supposed to be Moses, right? So understand, the Bible is different from the movie, but it's basically insinuating the exact same thing, especially when you take a look at it. Now it's clear as day that that baby looked just like her, white just like she is white. So how is it, if it wasn't for the cloth that she found inside, the basket, they wouldn't have been able to tell it that it's a Hebrew child. They look just alike. And just like in the movie, the same thing in the Bible, it says that Moses became a prince, meaning that he could blend in with the ancient Egyptians. Plain and simple. So it still goes back to the same question, like how would you know if they look alike? And in the Bible, it says that Moses became a prince, meaning he had to look like the Egyptians in order to blend in and for her to pass him off as her son. Same thing in the movie, look alike. So how is it? You have the order that has been given to go and kill all the men. Think about it. Kill all the men that's born and leave the woman alive. How would you know? How would you be able to tell? Now it says, Exodus 1:9, it says here, and he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. I mean, think about that. How? So if they are more and mightier than the Egyptians, how did they allow the Egyptians to basically put them into bondage if they're more and mightier? So you got to understand what it's saying here, who it's talking about. Now, when you read it and you understand it's the Greeks talking about the Egyptians. It's saying, hey, they are more and mightier than we. We have to basically do something to them. We have to go ahead and get rid of these Egyptians. When you understand the parable in Exodus, what it's saying. So we know, again, if you have the numbers, this is not, modern day where, we wear all different clothes. It's easy to tell who's who today. We're talking about thousands of years ago. First of all, one, if you have the Egyptians enslaving these Hebrews, I mean, they look alike, according to the book, according to the movie. But the Egyptians wear. They barely wear anything. It would be very easy as a Hebrew to go ahead and snatch the garment or get a white cloth and put it over yourself and pass yourself off as an Egyptian. They look alike, according to the movie and the book. So how would it be hard? This argument still, it goes into the whole Hebrew Israelite argument as well. Them saying again that, the Hebrews that was enslaved in Kemet was black. And remember, this is one of their whole arguments of them hating the Egyptians, is them saying, well, you have black Egyptians enslave black Hebrews, other black people. But if they was black, how could you tell? If their numbers was more, doesn't make sense. Any way you slice it, it does not fit. Now, it's a reason why, as we'll get into. So I'm from Philly, out here in Vegas, and I walk around. I can't tell, one black person if they from here in Vegas or if they're from Texas or they could be from Philly. We look the same to me. So, this is now, this day and age. So you're talking about, thousands of years ago. There's no way. There's no way you could tell. There's no way they would be able to look at the person and tell. So that whole situation should have been a lot more different. It shouldn't have been as if they was able to say, look, this guy's a Hebrew and, point the whole thing out and then, go attack. If that's the case and you're in a situation where they're killing all the freaking Hebrews, well, it's real easy to change if you look just like the people who doing the killing. It's crazy, but they can't say definitively that the Egyptians is black, because then we're the greatest civilization that ever lived. They can't say definitively that the Hebrews is black, because then we're the chosen people. We God's chosen people, everything like that. But they give us the movies showing them white. They give us the depictions showing them white. Hebrews white, the ancient Egyptians white. So it don't matter. The chosen people now, image of white people. Greatest civilization ever lived, image of white people. This is how they do it. Don't got to speak about it in the book. Just show the pictures, show the movies, and get people into the thinking that it's just a movie. But this is what they stamp. We're seeing the whole thing with the Nefertiti bust and them basically saying this is what she looked like. So they can do stuff like this and give validity, because this is what they're doing. This is what this whole thing is about. Them giving validity to the Hebrews in some capacity. Them talking about them, saying that this is what happened, they existed. That's the whole reason why this whole thing is here, to just try to give validity to the people. But it gets much deeper than that. You got to understand that you had the Greeks create a people out of thin air. So they know eventually, at some point in their plan, in their agenda, they will have to create these people. These Israelites will have to come from somewhere. Now, as I talked about in Ancient History series and many other videos as well, we understand what happened during Hellenization and the whole wars of the Diadochi. Them basically going into those territories that was Egyptians. There were African people in there, Egyptians, black people. They had to go. Plain and simple. They had to get them out of Israel because Israel was a part of the plan. They had to go. So what you had was them indoctrinate those Africans, the people who was there, sent them out teaching into other parts of Africa, what have you, which is why you have all this information out there and people talking about, oh, you have, the Hebrews going back, hundreds of years to these Africans. This is what was going on. We know Hellenization was them spreading this doctrine, and they had Africans doing it as well. Once, the whole generational time passed and they had indoctrinated the children and had them passing it down. So that happened. You had finally, most of the Africans, the black people in Israel gone. What the Greeks did, they moved their people into Israel. Plain and simple. You might as well call them sacrifice. They basically was sacrificing these people. When you understand in a second. But brought these people into Israel from Greece. This is what they do. We know when they come in to take over land, they bring their people. When they set up shop, game over. And then when you go and you start looking at the history of the Jews in Greece, which we know the oldest Jewish synagogue is supposed to be in Delos in Greece. But we also have the Romanite Jews who's supposed to have spread throughout Greece and other parts of Europe for over 2,000 years. They're supposed to exist for over 2,000 years. These Romanite Jews, you had them as well, be indoctrinated and get this whole teaching about Judaism coming into Greece and going into other places as well. So then you had indoctrination. You had Hellenization go on. And you had then the Greeks basically go out into, the so-called Middle East and bring back Arabs and bring them into Israel to basically mix in with the Greek people. And I talked about this. The reason why they look mixed is because they are. When you look at the Greeks today, look at what they look like. They look like Arabs. They look like Greeks. They look like a mix. They went out and indoctrinated these Arabs, brought them in to Greece to mix so they can create the Hebrew Israelites. Plain and simple. So that's basically what they did. They got the Arabs, brought them in, mixed them in with these Greeks. Plain and simple. Created this Hebrew, this Jewish race of people. They had to do it that way. Of course, they couldn't mix with black people, with the Africans, because we're dominant genes. We would show up and people would know, hey, the chosen people are black, so that's out the way. You can't just use Greeks because people would say, well, they're Greeks. Plain and simple. You can't, put yourself in these Hebrew shoes because you're Greeks, not Hebrews. This is not a Hebrew story. It's a Greek story. That will be obvious. So, and we're going to talk about in Leviticus who the Arabs really are. But got the Arabs, brought them in, mixed them, and boom, you have the sacrifice. Because that's basically what they are. These people were sacrificed, the sacrificial lamb. And this is basically they eat the whole lamb for Passover. As a sacrifice, not realizing that they are the sacrifice themselves. And that's what Holocaust means burnt offering or sacrifice. They were created to be sacrificed, plain and simple. So, to give validity to these people, this is what they had to do. And, these people was created to be sacrificed. And you have the real Jews, the ones who are really Greeks, as I've shown you guys. When you look at the ones that's in power, the ones with the beards, the reason why they have these beards to hide their real pale white faces, that's what they look like. Clear as day, you can see nothing but a white man with a beard. Plain and simple. That's all it is. They were sacrificed. Millions of people sacrificed so that they can give validity to these Jews and create a Jewish nation. Plain and simple. So when you go back and you understand when I was talking about the Romanite Jews, it says here, a majority of the Jewish population of Greece was killed in the Holocaust after Axis powers occupied Greece during World War II. They deported most of the Jews to Nazi concentration camps after the war. A majority of the survivors immigrated to Israel, the United States, and Western Europe. Today, there are still functioning Romanite synagogues in Chalix, which represents the oldest Jewish congregation on European ground, in Ionia, Athens, New York, and Israel. So there it is right there, plain and simple. Those people were allowed to be indoctrinated into, basically growing success just to be sacrificed. That was their whole purpose, to be sacrificed. So, when you look at it, it all makes sense. You could start putting it together at this point. because then you go back into Genesis. Remember, the grandfather, the originator of the Hebrew Israelites is who? Abraham. From where? Ur of the Chaldees, which is where? Mesopotamia, Iraq. See, now it all makes sense, and you understand why they did that. They had to make it as if the originator was from Iraq, because they knew they went out there to the Middle East, got those Arabs, brought them in to Israel and into Greece and let them mix. So now later on, people can say, well, they're not just Jews, not just Greeks, they mixed. Oh, they do have some Iraqi in them. They do have some Arab in them when you look at them. Giving validity to the Bible that Abraham must have been from Mesopotamia, because you have these Arab-looking, Greek-looking, mixed-looking people who are the so-called Hebrews. It's easy when you're paying attention when you look at it. So when you look at movies like Schindler's List, and these movies, just like the Exodus, is made to give these people sympathy, plain and simple, no matter which role you play in, whether they are the Jews looking white or the Nazis or what have you, it's the same, plain and simple. Now in Schindler's List, if you've seen the movie, it's shown in black and white, but you can't really tell these people apart if they wasn't dressed a certain way. They have on a Nazi uniform. The people who's doing all the killing and shooting, the so-called Nazis, look just like any one of those so-called Jews. Oscar Schindler with that nose looked more Jewish than some of the people who's supposed to be Jews in the movie. It's crazy. So that's why that was done. The only pop of color in that movie was when a little girl, was walking through town while they was raiding the town, and it was killing and, basically enslaving the Jews. Even when you look at her, she looked like could be any little white girl from anywhere USA. Plain and simple. And they look the same. So it's tough to, give their argument any validation that how would you be able to tell who was Jews back then and who was an Egyptian, what have you, if, according to them, the Egyptians was white. It would have been a lot more easier for them to definitively say who was who, but they can't do that. And this is one of the reasons why. So the Romanite Jews and the Jews in Poland and the Jews in Germany and Greece or what have you, they was allowed to come together, to practice their religion, to basically flourish, all to be sacrificed later on, plain and simple. So I always think about that episode, was it Going to Germany? It's a Family Guy episode. It's funny as hell when you have Stewie go back in time with Brian to basically, save Mort. And they end up back in, World War II, the beginning of World War II, when the Nazis invaded Poland or what have you. So remember, in that little cartoon, it's just so funny. They're having a good time. They don't want to leave. And then they realize that, hey, the Nazis are invading. And what does Stewie do? Quickly toss that hat. He just tossed the yarmulke. And after he tossed it, he blended in with the Nazis. They didn't know he was a Jew. And it's giving you a hint there. Even Mort, who is a Jew, he was walking around with a little priest outfit on, and they couldn't tell he was Jewish until, he gave it away. And even when he put on a Nazi uniform, they couldn't tell he was Jewish. It's just little things like that that's giving you those hints, subtle little hints. Walking around clear as day, just blending in with the people. How can you tell? They look the same. And it's crazy when you really start to dig into this stuff, because the Bible is put to you in certain ways where things like this really don't cross a lot of people's mind. You're not really critically thinking when you have somebody expressing the book to you. And then when you try to read it yourself, it's like, a lot of stuff don't make sense. It's done that way to confuse you. But they're giving you their history, plain and simple. They're breaking it down, telling you what happened, what's going to happen. So now, just like we can ask that question, how could they tell them apart? You have to then be smart enough to look at it from the other side. And remember, this whole thing is a setup anyway. They know that the people look exactly like them. They know this stuff is, it's bullcrap. So the whole thing with, Nazis and the Germans, as I said, can't really tell them apart. You can't really tell them apart. You go into Germany and look at some of those so-called Jews back then, couldn't tell. They looked white. You just really couldn't tell who was who. So them knowing that, you have to understand, of course, they understood. We got to create these people. We got to have this Holocaust. We got to give validity to these Jews. We got to create this Hebrew, this Israel nation. So they already had a plan ahead of time. Now, many of you probably know about this, the whole book about IBM and the Holocaust. So you had basically in 1880, someone from the U.S. Census Bureau come up with an idea to create these little, electronic cards, so to speak, that will basically collect data on people, store people's data on these cards. So you had in 1910 this whole German licensing company called Die Mag, which is basically an acronym for a much longer German name. But they basically, came up with the system and everything. And you had in April 12, 1933, the German government and IBM basically create this system and, have it out there and have it ready. If you remember IBM, their first factory was built in Germany. So you had this German, at that time, the German Census Bureau basically go out and start documenting these people. Remember, Hitler was all about technology. It was no different. He was about that technology and understanding what was going on. But they, ahead of time, already thought about this and had already began cataloging and documenting these people as Jews. So when the whole attack happened, they already had documentation. They knew who was Jews. They knew who was who already. It was no escape. Now, remember, the rumors was going on. If you read anything about the Holocaust, many of the survivors, them talking about all the warnings, underground warnings and people secretly talking about get out of Poland, get out of Germany, what was going to happen, but nobody would heed the warning. So we know that was going on. But you had, all this information out there. They had collected data. When the raids was happening, they knew where to go. They knew who was who. You had situations where even if you was just a regular person, not practicing the Jewish faith, but your grandma or your great grandparents was Jews, and you was just regular. You wasn't a Jew, you wasn't a Christian, you was an atheist, you was whatever, but you wasn't a Jew going to synagogues and everything like that, or doing anything to where a person could recognize you as a Jew. But they already had documented your grandparents as being Jews, and those people, even though they walking around like what's going on, they were still caught up. They were still caught, thrown in the concentration camps because they was the bloodline of these Jewish people. You got to understand, one, if in the 20th century they use IBM, which is a technology company, computer company, if they had to use them to catalog and identify who was Jews, explain to me how they was able to do it, 15th century BCE. How was the Egyptians able to say, that's a Jew, that's a Jew, that's a Jew, so on and so forth? How was this done? Especially if they were supposed to look alike. If you go by, the Europeans' definition, the Egyptians was white and the Hebrews was white, or even the black Hebrew Israelites, the Egyptians was black, the Hebrews was black. Either one you want to go to, how were they able to know who was who? Now, I don't like to go for that whole stupid shit that the Hebrews talking about as far as, or Africans look different than African Americans. So 2,000 years ago, before America was established and all this and that, how do we look? We don't know how we looked. I suggest we look the same. And I've been to Africa, and I tell you, some of the brothers there look just like me. So again, how are they able to tell? So again, of course, this whole thing, as I said, it's a story for you to get caught up in and lost in the fairy tale and everything like that. The Jedi mind trick, that's what it's about. Wave the hand and now you just forgot your common sense. But when you start really getting into it, you see exactly what it's talking about and how history fits in when you start reading the book. And you hear stuff come out, how the Bushes related and how the Wahlbergs and all these other rich families supposedly had donated to the whole Hitler fund and helped Hitler out and everything. Nothing. No charges, nothing. Plain and simple. But they went out and tracked down the Germans who was following orders. They tracked those people down like crazy because it gives validity to the story. They sacrifices, plain and simple. Even though they was patsies the whole time. All that stuff. I mean, you can't turn on cable without seeing something Hitler. You damn sure can't watch Family Guy without seeing it. It's everywhere. And now you know why. You understand. It's part of the same plan. Same people. America, it's the same thing. No different from the Nazis than America. It's the same thing. They funded the whole entire thing. It was behind it. Why do we give billions a year to the Hebrews, to Israel? Think about that. Billions, like 20, 30 billion a year to these people for what? And when you understand who's running things, where the power comes from, and how the Jews play in with the Romans, because who are they really? So now you get that connection. So because we know that in Israel, it ain't no damn so-called Jews there. We know it's Greeks. We know it's white people, plain and simple. So now you get that connection with them and the Romans, plain and simple, while we funding Israel, while the Pope constantly coming to America. Everything starts to fit, and you start to see what these people have effectively done. And it's deep. So now, again, this is why we went into the whole thing with the wall, in Israel, why you see so many celebrities, so many famous people, actors, musicians, what have you, go to the wall. Politicians, everybody goes to the wall. You get it now. It's because they understand who's in power. They understand who's controlling things and who's really running America. It's not a coincidence, as I showed you in the pictures, why you have all these presidents, celebrating Jewish holidays, remembering the Jewish holidays. And, we give so much money ever since Israel became a nation, billions of dollars going to Israel. It's right there in front of your face. All the people running the banks, the bankers, politicians, people in high-ranking positions, people in positions of power, Jews. It's not a coincidence, but you're going to keep seeing this stuff. And you see these people go to the wall because they know this is why they go, and they want to make sure that they are seen, and that the people who are in power, the powers that be, notice them going to the wall and paying their respect, them understanding who the real bosses is. So again, it's just tough for a lot of people to put it together because they are so good at trying to show the world that, the consensus is we don't like the Jews. The Jews are bad, being a Jew is a bad thing. So it's funny how you have the Jews putting out that image. It makes sense. They are the ones who are putting that stuff out. They're the ones who run Hollywood. So why are they putting out this image of Jews being negative? So it's to cover up who they really are, especially with Family Guy and everything. You see that a lot, how they get bashed. And you have a lot of movies and so many different things where the Jews are being bashed for a reason. So that connection is clear, especially after you see a video like this and you get it down. So a lot of people get confused about that whole thing, who was really in power, who was running what. And we just simply understand how you had the Jewish power, which is really the Greeks, and the Roman power, which is Rome, the Pope, and why they, seem to go hand in hand. And then you see the Pope again with the Islamic leaders. They're a team. They're running the whole thing. And it's only a few countries left, a few places left that they don't have. And again, it's going to be up to the people to realize what's going on and to figure out if they want to stop it or not. So again, as long as they can keep confusing the people and keep us divided and separated and worried about entertainment and everything like that, which the Jews provide for us, then we'll never figure this stuff out. A lot of people don't want to figure it out. A lot of people don't want to know. You are a rare person, trust me, to want to gain this knowledge. A lot of people just don't want it. They want to just, go to sleep and think happy thoughts and just believe that everything is working the way it's supposed to be, everything is right with the world. People can't fathom this stuff.